So you live in D.C., right, Max?
Yeah, we got to get vaxxed.
Yeah, I
and then
got to
we'll do a live show.
Yeah, we got to get vax. I got to get a vax.
I got to get my vaccination comedy passport. And then eat a Bill Gates Impossible Burger on stage. It'll be the Great Reset comedy show.
Why do you call it a Bill Gates Impossible Burger?
Isn't it, some Gates investments?
Did he invest in that? Is that part of him too?
Yeah, as the largest owner of farmland in the U.S.
Is Bill Gates?
Yeah, and a big investor in the World Economic Forum, which is recommending everyone eat like Impossible and Beyond burgers in the future, and provide chemical companies and big pharma with huge, their investors with huge profits. That's kind of what they're.
I didn't know that was Bill Gates. I get bad feeling about that guy.
Hold on. Yeah, you get a bad feeling about Bill Gates. a guy with no college degree who has no medical expertise telling us what science should do seems
so kind of. I know when I tell that to people, they say that, oh, you're crazy. Like, Bill Gates is a good guy. He's trying to help people. He's trying to bring people vaccines. What could possibly be nefarious about that? That's what they say to me. And I say, well, if you don't know that he's investing in the vaccines development, and then he's also investing in the distribution of it, but more so than that, even he's investing in the media that covers these things.
Yeah.
That's the crazy thing. So he'll give money to PBS NewsHour. They'll cover his vaccine. And nobody tells you that Bill Gates is developing it and he's paying for this news coverage. And by the way, so I don't know if that's messed up, but it just struck me as that's not right. I don't think that's right. Is that right?
Well, beyond being the key investor in Beyond Meats and Impossible Burger, which are being advanced by the World Economic Forum, Bill Gates convinced Oxford University not to make its vaccine that it developed public, and in tandem with AstraZeneca, and convinced them to sell it privately and I think exclusively to the EU. I could be getting a few details wrong, but he basically convinced them to make it a profitable vaccine instead of just giving it to the public as a public good, like the Sputnik 5 vaccine has been provided in Russia. And it's pretty obvious why, because he's a major investor in all of this. And again, I mean, he's put forward by people like the New York Times reporter Sherry Fink, who's been covering the pandemic, as this guru of science who will save us from a pandemic. And if you look up Sherry Fink's bio, I mean, she even did the Netflix documentary Pandemic. She was the producer and documentarian that, was magically, I mean, I'm not going to get conspiratorial, but it was amazing how it was made right before the pandemic hit. But if you look at her career, she's worked for one Bill Gates funded foundation after another. So her whole career has been supported by Bill Gates. And then she comes out as the propagandist for his agenda. And yeah, you're right. Bill Gates, I mean, he's kicking down millions to The Guardian, to Vox, NPR, Al Jazeera. I mean, they don't have enough money coming out of the ground in Qatar. So they're taking millions from Gates. And then what are they doing? They're doing very positive coverage of Gates. It's straight up corruption.
So, and nobody talks. So that's what makes me think well, what is Bill Gates up? Why is he doing this? What does he get out of it? And I know he's invested in these things, but he's already got so much money. Is he really still motivated by money, you think? Or is it just control?
Yeah, how much money do you need? Well, I mean, Bill Gates, the Gates Foundation really is one of the most powerful power governments. It's basically, it's more powerful than most governments on the planet. And I think that kind of power can be attractive to someone who was already a pathological narcissist, megalomaniac, someone who was drawn into the corporate world.
You think Bill Gates is a megalomaniac?
He's definitely existing on a different plane. And if you're watching this, I'd really recommend a piece we did. We did a long investigation on Gates. Michelle Greenstein and Jeremy Lafredo, two young investigative reporters, did a deep dive on Gates for the Grayzone. And I mean, if you just go to our site, thegrayzone.com, A with the instead of E, Gray with an A, then you'll find that article. Just search Bill Gates, and it's really just deeply disturbing the amount of possible crimes that he's been involved in through mass vaccination testing campaigns in India and Africa, where, for example, polio vaccines were tested on kids at an ashram in India. Why were they tested on them? Because these children were orphans. There were no parents who could issue parental consent forms. They didn't exist. And many of the children died. I think I'm getting this correct. And, they just move on. That kind of oral vaccine was not accepted by Western industrialized countries where children do have to receive parental consent. And, we use a different kind of vaccine, but this is sordid behavior. I'm not questioning the importance of vaccination, by the way. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I'm an anti-oligarcher. And Bill Gates, a figure like him, should not have this much control over public health. It's obvious he's trying to privatize public health. And another thing that he's doing, which other billionaires like Pierre Omidyar, owner of The Intercept, but also key funder of Bill Kristol's media empire, what they're doing is they're trying to get everyone in the global south into cashless payments, because you have a whole economy. If you've ever been to like Central America or Sub-Saharan Africa, you have a whole economy where people are using cash or barter systems, and those people therefore aren't participating in the globalized economy. They are not paying special fees for electronic transfers. And so USAID, which, basically is a fake aid front for U.S. financial capital and supports regime change around the world, they're teaming up with Omidyar's foundations and the Gates Foundation to promote cashless transfer systems for the poor. And it's just a way of getting them in debt and shaving off money from people who otherwise have no value to these billionaires. I mean, this is the only way that, poor people in this global south can have any value to these billionaires. There's so many angles you can look at. You can see Bill Gates from to see what a sinister individual and what a sinister operation he runs. I mean, you can look at the fact that there's this revolving door between the Gates Foundation and Big Pharma and the World Health Organization, so that they're enacting the agenda of Big Pharma. But you don't see those angles produced or investigated in mainstream media. And you just hit on why, Jimmy. Because
he's funding a lot of the media.
Yeah. And I was really collapsing.
I don't, again, I don't understand why a guy who never went to college and is a billionaire is being interviewed on news shows about the vaccine. Why is he being interviewed? Why wouldn't you interview a doctor? Why wouldn't you interview a virologist? Why wouldn't you interview somebody who's running the tests? Why are you interviewing a college dropout billionaire about a vaccine? Because he looks smart and he's wearing a sweater? I'm like, why is he leading? Why is that the guy leading the thing? It doesn't. I don't know why. I just happen that these just seem like obvious questions, and no one's asking them, and no one's answering them. Like,
yeah,
like, why wouldn't someone who's interviewing Bill Gates, like, why are you the person? Why wouldn't somebody just say that? Why wouldn't you hand this off to a doc? What are you doing? And anyway,
yeah.
Anyway, let's get to our next story.
That's great questions. Great questions. You see Gates just challenged so little, and this is like the key figure during this pandemic who's making the sausage. So
yeah,
I guess it's all, I wanted to say one other thing, which is this. It's really sad, actually, that I principally see Gates being challenged and scrutinized on the far right. People who you would see at QAnon events, they're the ones talking about Gates, or they're the people who are actually putting forward bogus conspiracy theories about the pandemic. They're concerned about Bill Gates, but on the left, talking about him is considered a sign of insanity or being right wing. When these are the people that we should be going after.
I just asked the question why. I couldn't believe it. I kept turning on the TV, and there's the Bill Gates being interviewed about the vaccine, and I'm like, who the hell is? Why are we listening to? Why is he on the forefront of this? And then when I asked people that, they did exactly what you said. They're like, "Oh, what do you got a problem with Bill Gates? A guy wants to help people." I was like,
"Yeah,
well,
I mean, it's understandable also why people would develop conspiracy theories about Gates. I mean, if you followed Event 201, it's just simply bizarre.
What is that?
They ran a simulation. Johns Hopkins University and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation ran a simulation at Johns Hopkins University in October 2019 of what a pandemic would look like if it took place. And they brought together intelligence officials and former and current government officials. Yes. Avril Haines, who is now the DNI, Director of National Intelligence for Biden, was a participant. And if you go online and you look up the simulation, they created a fake news broadcast from a news channel called GNN instead of CNN. And the reports were identical to the real reports, if you can call CNN a real network, of what took place during the pandemic about food hoarding and panic buying, the need for a vaccination, questions about the origins of the virus. The virus was considered a coronavirus. But I mean, this is because the scientific consensus understood that a pandemic was on the horizon sooner or later. So I don't think that they were actually, this led many people to believe that Bill Gates actually created the virus for his own benefit in some lab somewhere. And obviously I don't believe that. I've seen no evidence of it. If I saw evidence of it, I'd be like screaming from the rooftops. But what I do believe is that Gates, through running this gigantic global para-government, which aimed to privatize public health care and push the agenda of big pharma and had access to so many scientists, he understood that there was going to be a pandemic at some point in the future just because of the global food supply, just because of the way that the world works, unfortunately, and that he was going to profit from it. This is the way capitalism works, and the people who dominate capitalism profit from disasters. It's disaster capitalism is all it is. So in that sense, he's completely sinister, but I can see why people would develop these conspiracy theories when he's putting on these simulations that look so remarkably similar to the current reality we're living through.
So if they knew this kind of a pandemic was coming, Max, this is my question, and they even thought it was going to be a coronavirus, and they did these simulations, why didn't they have a better plan to fucking handle it when it happened? Like, they knew it was coming, they do a simulation, it comes, and nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. Isn't that weird? Right. Like, you'd think they would know what to do if they did that simulation and they're all thinking about it ahead of time and they're all planning to the point where they have a fake news thing. I mean, why wouldn't they have a plan to handle it then?
Yeah, and it seems that China took this more seriously than the U.S. and put people on lockdown in January. But the U.S., I mean, first of all, you have politicians and a public that wasn't on board or prepared or involved in any public education campaign about the danger of a pandemic. There was no public education. And of course, there's no public media. It's all corporations. What they proceeded to do was downplay it. Even Vox, which was funded by Bill Gates, published an article urging readers not to wear masks. Anthony Fauci, I mean, you talked about this, how he lied about masks. So it wasn't just Donald Trump downplaying it. I think Trump was downplaying it to keep the markets calm because that's where, that's all he thinks about. And he has very little credibility with half the public. So it's just complete chaos. And the U.S. public would not have been on board in January before some fear-mongering campaign or seeing people they knew get infected with it for a giant lockdown. So I think it was pretty much impossible for the public to be cultivated for any kind of protocol until they were sufficiently scared with months and months of news coverage about it, and they saw people get infected or they themselves got infected. So next time it'll be easier. And we're seeing like all kinds of new mechanisms of control being tested through the pandemic. I mean, people called me a lunatic at the beginning of the pandemic, like back in March when the lockdown began, when I said that there's an indication that there will be something like vaccination passports where only people who have had vaccinations will be able to travel to certain countries or board airlines, and that there'll be kind of like a vaccination apartheid because it's much easier for affluent people to get vaccines, and only 14% of the world's population, which lives in industrialized first world countries, is really getting the vaccines anyway. So that's coming true. But we're also seeing, because of January 6th, the public is just completely accepting of the fact that an entire area of Washington, D.C. is under military control. This is, a dimension of control layered on top of the fear of the pandemic. So I think we're being brought into another era where the public is less willing to push back. But I think, the reason that the government couldn't come up with a plan had to do with just the way that the public meant the mentality of the public and the Trump administration, and the fact that Democrats weren't even taking it that seriously. And then, look at the Senate Intelligence Committee, Jimmy. They had a briefing as the pandemic started to spread, but before the lockdown began and before the public was sufficiently warned about it. And Kelly Loeffler and Richard Burr, who were on the Intelligence Committee, what did they do? They didn't go tell their constituents, you guys need to get home, you need to separate or put on masks or whatever. They just sold all their stocks. They're criminals who should be, frog marched into a federal prison, and all the nonviolent criminals should be let out to make room for them so they can socially distance. What did Bill Gates do? He resigned from Microsoft. He didn't tell the public anything. He just resigned because just like Jeff Bezos did from Amazon. Why? Because he didn't want to face the music. He was worried his company might, lose profits during the pandemic, but it's worked out very well for these billionaires, and the public has lost trillions.
Hey, everybody, this is the part where I tell you where all our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then this is why I tell you to join our premium program and get extra content, but nobody's got a fucking job. So just enjoy the video.